Hello there, and welcome to Data Dialogues, your Data Vault podcast. I'm guest host Paul Barlow, which most of you don't know me, but I'm the community coordinator for DVIC. The reason that I'm sitting on this side of the table is because I want to learn a little bit more about WWDVC, the Worldwide Data Vault Consortium that's happening in Vermont next month. I figure the best people to talk to are the ones who normally run this podcast, so I've kicked them out of the office and I'm in charge for a little bit. Now, WWDVC is the biggest meeting place for experts from around the globe, with clients, vendors, and practitioners all in one place, making it the perfect spot to network, learn, and see what's coming to the world of Data Vault. This year in Vermont, Data Dialogue's own Julian Redmond, hey Julian, how you going?
Hey, Phil.
Is attending and presenting as a panelist. Last year and in previous years, Nohls Ebersohn, Principal Architect at Ignition, hey Nohls, how you going? Has also attended. So if see, everybody knows everyone. It's great. I figured that if I wanted to know more about the event and what Data Vault experts could get from it, these two were a great place to start. So, first of all, how are you both going?
Very well.
All excited? Because it's what, a week or so until you have to sort of... Yeah.
I fly out in just a few hours over a week.
That's good. That gives us recording time for next week.
Absolutely.
Come up with something brilliant then. Be great fun. And are you jealous that you're not getting to go this year, Nohls?
Absolutely. It's unfortunate circumstances that I can't make it this year to Vermont. I will definitely be missing out significantly. So very sad, but at least I hope to give you a bit of a flavour of what to expect while you're there.
So one of the things I actually learned yesterday, all very last minute research, there's apparently a funny shirt day or a loud shirt day or something like that happens with this event. What's the story with that?
So you go prepared.
The look so the moment Julian's like, what?
It started with... it's a little bit of the folklore. When the very first WWDVC was issued, it was a much smaller event, but it still had a good fun element, and you can expect to have quite a bit of fun while you're out there at the conference as well. It's not just all work. There's some fun to be had. And Dan used to joke that his formal attire, his company uniform, is a Hawaiian shirt. So when he started first contracting, he was always wearing a Hawaiian shirt because that was appropriate for the client he was working for. So that's the formal sort of attire. And so the crazy shirt day on Friday is sort of a door prize kind of thing. And that's just to have a bit of fun. So if you have a really crazy shirt, you can make it a little bit Data Vault related to some degree. It's fair game. And so from that perspective, it sort of ends the week-long worth of conference activities with a bit of tongue-in-cheek fun.
Are you ready for that, Julian?
Not quite. I'll certainly be looking through my wardrobe, but I might have to take a trip to the shops.
Do some shopping while you're there. You might as well.
That's true. I'll have a little bit of time.
So, Nohls, other than learning a little bit more about people's fashion sense, I'm wondering, what have you gotten out of this in the last couple of events that you've been to, Nohls? Is there something that you've sort of really been impressed by, or something that you've taken away that sort of still sticks with you?
First and foremost, you're rubbing shoulders with some of the leading thought leaders in the industry without any doubt. You may be able to bump into Bill Inman, Scott Ambler, many other luminaries, Dan himself, of course. And so being at the conference, hosting it, you certainly see a bit of him. But the thing that really resonates is how down-to-earth they all are. They're approachable, they're happy to share their wisdom and their experience at the conference. And, of course, the stories they tell are always a hoot. There's a lesson to be learned out of that. But fundamentally, it's the friendly atmosphere, any questions are fair game, and getting it straight from the most experienced practitioners around the globe is invaluable. So you build up contacts about certain people doing certain things on certain technologies. And so if you really, really wanted to know all of the ins and outs of a certain platform, you have a contact, you have a face, you have a name, you can reach out to them, and they're more than happy to actually help you out and have a conversation with somebody that may have questions among that, for instance, around Redshift or any other technologies, etc., or testing for that matter. All sorts of topics are fair game. And so the value of meeting and building that network of professionals at the coalface, solving real-world problems, is invaluable.
Out of curiosity, then, how have you incorporated what you've learned from these events into what your approach is with Data Vault?
It's interesting that most people relate to real examples. And so if you're in a conversation, you can say, okay, a good friend, Mike, that did a certain amount of work at Micron, the scale, the size, those type of things. You can then, if people need be, put them in contact. You can learn how they solved a particular tricky problem, how they solved security and industrial espionage, for instance, at Micron. And so all of these type of things become very, very relevant to having the conversation about similar problems, not necessarily at that scale. But that's what the conversation brings, is that you know that scale problem has been solved well and truly around the globe. And so that becomes extremely valuable to put some more hesitant explorers of Data Vault at ease to go, no, this has been done and dusted at a very high level. So it's very useful to have that kind of frame of reference.
So, Julian, as an upcoming panelist, I'm keen to know sort of what it is that you wanted to present about. Like, why did you want to present, and what are you hoping that your audience gets out of your time there?
Yeah, I'll be sitting on a panel on day one, which is the business-focused stream. Obviously, being not at the same technical level as Nohls and a lot of my other colleagues, I focus more on the business aspects of why people do these projects. And I think there's a fair bit of value in having that conversation with this audience. It is probably more a technical audience at the event, from what I understand, and this is my first time going, so maybe I'll report back on that. But the perspectives of the conversations we have with business users and their hesitancy to make the leap into Data Vault, or what kind of proof points they actually need to be able to present it to the board, in confidence to build the business case, to kind of have those social proofs and references and case studies and all of those things that actually give people confidence to back doing something a little bit different. And Data Vault's got a huge amount of momentum in certain parts of the world, and in our region, we're still probably having people look at it, but it doesn't have the same momentum and volume of case studies. So, as Noel said, making those links with other people, and so that's the conversation that I'll be having: is what sort of business conversations are we having? How are we engaging the market? Obviously, it relates very heavily to DVIC as well, and what we're doing from a community perspective for outreach and helping people understand Data Vault. So that's kind of the position I'll take when I'm on the panel.
So what would you see as being the most important reason to attend?
Yeah, I have kind of a couple of key reasons why I'm going this year. As Noel said, the networking and the relationships that get created by connecting with the best Data Vault practitioners globally is invaluable for us. We want to bring the knowledge of all of these experts to our region. We're already obviously the experts regionally, and we're very good at doing Data Vaults, but it never hurts to lean on someone who's done it at a larger scale or in a different technology stack. And so having those relationships in place and being able to make a call and say, hey, would you talk to this customer for us because they're thinking about doing Data Vault in this way on this technology or whatever it is. That's really valuable for us. And so having those connections is great. But the second part of that for me is promoting what we're doing with the DVIC here, and making sure that all of those individuals and all of those organisations are also participating and talking to this community that's building rapidly. So we've obviously got some of our partners that have recently joined us with Scale Free and VoltSpeed and Orion and Clean Data. You know, those guys are already on board with DVIC, and that might be news for some seeing this early. But obviously, there's a influx of sponsorship and companies getting involved. So it's really to invite all of the other major players in the Data Vault space to come and join us here and help create a bigger audience and a lot more activity, a lot more interesting content. And then there is one other key reason. I want to go and do a bunch of interviews as well and get some more interesting content for us to share with the community and get some opinion. But yeah, those interviews, I think to hear from those people and get little snippets, obviously that helps promote the value of the WWDVC event. So that if people from our region or anyone joining the DVIC learns about it and decides to head over next year, but also share some of those little insights and what have you. So.
This is probably a really good time to sort of interject and remind people that they can actually download the DVIC community app directly from their app store. They could find us on places like LinkedIn and YouTube and pretty much anywhere that you can get podcasts these days, everywhere. So there's no excuse for people not to join.
Absolutely.
It's always fun to join a new community and explore and see what's on there. Nohls, I'm kind of curious, would you agree with those sort of reasons for being at WWDVC? Like the sort of highlight points.
Absolutely.
Super easy answer. I love it.
Absolutely. There's one additional element that if there was any changes in standards or changes in technical capabilities, so last year the experimentation was announced about, what if your data is too big to move? What is the actual solution around that? So that's gone into R&D, and so quite keen to see what the outcomes have been as announcements from this year. For instance, vendor certification programs were launched. A number of initiatives were essentially published or announced at WWDVC. So if you really want to keep on top of what's happening in the Data Vault world from a design and a technical perspective, that's the forum where most announcements would also surface. So that it's really important from that perspective too. So it's not just about the networking. There is some important technical components that are typically announced at the conference.
It sounds a little bit like Comic-Con for WWDVC, WWDV. It's costumes and big announcements. Movie trailers? Are there movie trailers for the stuff that's coming up? I'm guessing.
Well, perhaps not movie trailers, but you get it in a live announcement by the inventor, if that is similar in context.
That must be something very cool, though, to be a part of, to sort of see somebody who had this vision and to see how that evolves and develops and what it means for the future.
Absolutely, and other luminaries like Bill Inman, for instance, published the refinement of the definition of what is a data warehouse, the father of data warehousing, making amendments, recognizing Data Vault as the premier approach to data warehousing. So 2018, it was first announced at WWDVC. The refinement to the definition of what a proper data warehouse is was announced by Bill himself. So you get quite a bit of context to be part of some of those historical moments, which is, as you pointed out, quite exciting.
So when it comes to this event, you get to connect with other people for obvious reasons. We've had a couple of years with things like a pandemic stopping in-person events. How have you found that those sort of connections, both the ones that you make in person and the ones virtually, have helped you with what you do, with how you approach as a data architect?
Well, the pandemic threw a few spanners in the works. So
one or two.
Let's call it what it is, right? Yeah. But the the conference rallied. Dan and the team rallied at Data Vault Alliance, rallied around that. The next year's conference was fully virtual. So everyone spent their times in the chat rooms outside of the actual vending sessions, etc. That worked quite well. It was great to catch up and see those people that you've met before. Met a few new people through that medium. It was effective, but it was not as effective of being there and sort of sharing some war stories, at an event afterwards, or having a meal together and sort of getting to know people a little bit more deeper. So the in-person is still the premier method of attending the conference as such. But if you can't make it, they record all of that. Those recordings are available. And so looking forward to those. I stayed up to watch the live broadcasts last year. So I felt all of the jet lag, but none of the travel distance.
It doesn't sound fair.
And that's okay.
It doesn't sound like a fair trade-off to me at all.
So in person is best. Yeah.
So one of the perks then for you, Julian, obviously going in person, one, it's Vermont. You can get maple syrup, which apparently is really good there. And if you want to pick me up some, I'm not going to say no. But I'm also really curious to know, which other panelists are you really looking forward to seeing, and why?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess the whole business stream is very interesting. I think, well, Noel said that certainly there'll be lots of updates to the technical standards or initiatives that are going on. I will listen keenly, but I may not necessarily always grasp all of the concepts. The business stream is probably the most interesting for me, I think. But getting to talk to Scott Ambler about agile delivery and what that means, really not just from the technical team, but how we actually have to organise the business to embrace agile. I'm keen to have some of those conversations. Getting to meet Bill Inman and talk about how data warehousing is actually spoken about in the wider business context. Data warehousing as a topic, we've had customers who say, don't say the data warehouse word. It's got to be lake, or it's got to be whatever, just because there's been a history of some challenging projects, and some people have kind of been burnt out by spending money on data warehousing that didn't work for them. So how do we talk to those organisations about what's changed and what's evolved, and why Data Vault 2 actually helps people to be successful, not only in building a data warehouse, but maintaining it over time and all those sorts of things. So they're the sorts of things that I'm looking forward to most. There's definitely some connections I've made virtually over the last few years with some technology partners that we have that I'm looking forward to actually meeting those people in person. There's nothing like in-person interaction, I think.
It's much more fun, and you can drink more.
Yeah.
It's great.
And I definitely plan to do a bit of a travel vlog thing so that our audience can get a bit of a feel for what it's like to attend. So some of those conversations that happen, and so I'll grab some snippets and I'll throw them your way, Paul, to edit up, and we'll share with this audience, because there's a number of presentations we've got snippets of a handful of presentations from the past that are already on the site. People want to go and search for that stuff and have a look at the types of presentations that are actually up. But that's that is the technical presentations, and probably the bit we haven't been able to share yet, which hopefully we will this year, is the kind of social and networking aspects.
One of the things you brought up before was around the language use, data vaulting, data warehousing, and it makes me wonder, when it comes to approaching clients and working with clients, what sort of tips and tricks do you think you can pick up from an event like this on how to best work with those end user clients?
Yeah, I think Noel's hit on it before. People want to hear stories about where it's worked and where and what were the challenges faced and how were those challenges overcome. It's fine to be very prescriptive about the standards and the policies and the methodology and the templates and the automation and all of those things, but I think people want examples. We have our own examples. We've obviously built a lot of data vaults, but the where you can be more specific, where you can, if you're talking to an insurance company and you can say, well, we have these 12 other insurance companies globally that have all been in the same position as you and done the same sort of project as you, and here's the insights that they gathered. And that's obviously one of our driving kind of methodologies here for the DVIC is to get customer stories up, but being able to put people in direct contact rather than a link to a video, actually allowing people to have a conversation. So I think data warehousing, information management, information hubs, data lakes, all of these concepts, they're all talking about the same sorts of things. As can we organize information in a way where we can prove that it's valid and that it's real and it's fit for purpose, and we've reconciled it and we've audited it, and and we know that it's good to go. And done on a whole bunch of different technology stacks, and Data Vault really gives people that right set of approaches to being able to do that effectively and maintain it over time. And I think more than anything, we need to kind of be really inclusive about, well, I don't overly mind what you call your program. We just want to help you get the result. We want to apply this blueprint, this methodology to the way you go about it, to the really important bits, so you don't miss a step or what have you, and then you get a result. Because in the end, that's what we're about: is the business results, not perfect databases.
It sounds a little bit like the Dove soap effect, and knowing the difference between. Have you ever heard of the Dove soap effect?
I have not.
So it's actually a marketing term, and it's because when Dove soap first came out, they claimed that it had 1/4 softening cream in it.
Right.
Not 1/4 moisturizing cream, which they claim now. And their sales were absolutely terrible. Still did a very good job as a soap. Everybody knows what a soap is. But that 1/4 softening cream versus 1/4 moisturizing cream showed that the audience had a different perception as to what was in there and how it worked based on just the terminology that was used and the expertise of how it was sold. Sounds very much like Ignition has that expertise to be able to go, look, this is the difference, this is what's similar, this is how everything is going to work the way it needs to work.
Yeah, I think we have a really good idea of that. We want to share our ideas with the others that are doing data vaults globally and understand how they're talking about it to their customers and how they're helping their customers to get those programs of work, up and moving in those organizations and really making sure they're successful. That's, more than anything, it's not about doing technology projects. It's about delivering business value. So.
Exactly. So, Nohls, we'll get you to turn your microphone back on now, if it's all clear.
Yep.
All good. Busy place. Like you're out in the middle of nowhere at the moment, and you've got like the busiest house out of anybody that I've spoken to today. It's insane. It's great. Hey, looking back on some of your past presentations, I'm really curious how interactive you found that experience. Like, was the audience highly engaged, asking the sort of questions that you weren't expecting or were expecting? What was that challenge?
It's phenomenal, because you have some of the brightest minds around the world in your audience, and so you better be you got to have your facts straight, so that when you chat to them, that the questions come back. You need to make sure that what you're presenting is sound. You get very insightful questions out of the audience because of their experience, because of their attitudes and aptitudes. They are certainly those somewhat rebellious, because that is what you had to be to change the paradigm. As such, and so from that perspective, you have a sense of real engagement and some really, really interesting conversations around the role that machine learning and AI and those type of things will have in the future, and what currently does, all the way from geothermal exploration all the way to the Large Hadron Collider and how they manage the many petabytes of data out of a single 10-second run of experimentation. So it's a phenomenal experience to get that caliber of question coming back.
That sounds amazing. I want to know now how they do that with the collider. That's not something I've even ever considered, but it makes a ton of sense. What would you say is probably the most challenging question you've had thrown at you then? Is there one that stands out?
The most challenging question. Oh, that's really interesting. I did a talk about the laws of or the natural laws of information and the transition of information going because it's within its full context within the system becomes only data when it leaves the system, and then it goes to the data vault, and that's why it's called the data vault, not the information vault, because it contains that additional context to it, and then it becomes information once again when the end user engages at the end. And so the most perceptive question was how that transition occurs and how that definition then applies to the overall architecture was probably one of those really questions that I felt, okay, the audience understood at least a semblance of what we were talking about when we talked about the natural laws of information, by the way, which were defined by Professor Werner Gitt from Germany as the dean or the professor at the State University for Science and Information. So it was a very interesting conversation to have, because that's more of a philosophical, metaphysical kind of conversation than necessarily this is how you organize your tables and columns. So that was a very interesting question.
So when you hear something like that, Julian, do you crap yourself a little bit here?
Well, not really. I just won't engage in that conversation at the same level.
You don't need to go down the metaphysical path?
Well, I mean, the position that I often take is, I try and be the transition layer, or the translation layer maybe, between our technical teams and the business teams, the customers we're working with. Generally, we have an enterprise architect or an information architect, a bunch of data engineers. They talk with my team, and they all talk the same language, and they can argue various points of things. And what the business is hearing is, we need to organize our information so that we can actually deliver these insights. Because if we don't deliver these insights, we can't improve that process, or we can't improve the bottom line over here, or we can't manage our costs through this, this part of our business. And so they're really interested in, what is it you're actually doing? Because we say, oh, we're over here, we're connecting systems, or we're dealing with architectural issues, or we're solving technical debt. And do any of those terms actually mean anything to the business user? And if you can actually help them say, well, this is providing us an additional foundational step so that you can leverage that step next time you want insights quickly. The next time you want to have another look at that process and slice it up from a different dimension, the data's already available in your warehouse, and all the problems or challenges with getting that data in or making that data usable have already been solved. And so you have a warehouse of raw facts that you can kind of build insights on. And so I try and just help people who are non-technical kind of understand what the technical teams on our side and their side are actually talking about, and then it's really about, then, well, okay, how do we get the rest of the business on board with that? How do we help people adapt to the change? How do we help them understand what they're looking at? And how do we help them ask better questions? Because if the data and the information is all there ready, then it's really down to the quality of the question that's being asked as to the insight that they might, that might improve their business.
Last questions for you. This one's for Nohls. What advice have you got for Julian on his first trip?
Vermont is a little bit of a hike. So I think some of the advice has already been taken by get there a day or so earlier so that you can acclimatize a little bit, so that you don't feel like it's bedtime when you're supposed to be paying attention as part of a panel. So that's probably one of the biggest survival tips as such. But enjoy Vermont. It is beautiful. It's early spring. You may still have a little bit of snow in places. It offers tremendous amount of delights, lots of national parks and ski slopes that make fantastic vistas if you get a chance to go for a hike, for instance, or go for a paddle if you're so inclined on one of the lakes. So lots to do, lots to see. The maple syrup is first class, absolutely hands down, something that you do need to bring a case of back because you're going to have lots of demand for that, Julian. And so from that perspective, enjoy Vermont. It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful setting. It's early spring. And so by all means, enjoy it. You'll have great company, great conversations. And the food's not half bad in that neck of the woods. So all round, not a bad place to be in early May.
Right, and last question for you, Julian. How are people going to be able to track you down while they're there? Because I'm sure they're going to be dying to want to come onto the podcast, going to be dying to know more about DVIC. Is there going to be a way that they can track you down once they're there?
Yeah, so if anyone's actually at WWDVC, then obviously I'm on a panel on the first day for the business panel. We'll also be doing a brief discussion about the communities. So there's a presentation around the various communities that support Data Vault. So this community specifically, and then some of the user groups like the North American user group. And so Cindy and I will be doing a bit of a discussion around those. So I'll be making myself known, and I'll also be floating around with my phone and a microphone and a little tripod stand, trying to talk to lots of people. So so hopefully you can recognise me and jump out and grab me. And obviously we'll be posting lots of stuff, or I'll be getting it back to you, Paul, and we'll be trying to get that onto LinkedIn and up on the DVIC and onto our other channels. So hopefully there'll be some interesting content.
There'll be heaps.
I've never traveled before, so we'll see how good I am at that. I'll be learning quickly.
If the celebrities that do it these days can do it, you'll be fine. Some of them not too bright. You'll be absolutely brilliant.
Perfect.
Enjoy the trip. I really look forward to seeing the content that comes through from it and what you actually bring to the table. That it's going to be so much fun to see all of these experts and how much passion and drive they bring with their knowledge and skill base. And you're added into the mix of that, of course. So good luck. Don't break a leg up there. It'll be very exciting, though, for you. Big, long trip as well, isn't it? Because you're off overseas somewhere else afterwards.
I am coming home via Europe, so I'm going a long way around to go have a chat with Scale Free and a few of our other partners that are in the UK and in Europe. So it'll be a bit of a long trip, but very, very worth it and very valuable for us.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure, as always.
Thanks, guys.
Great. See ya.